at me now. Look at me now. Solving proportions. Look at me now. Look at me now. Cross multiplying any.
Hello and welcome to the Kearney Math Show. Thank you all for tuning in today. On today's episode of the Kearney Math Show, we are going to be featuring mini lesson 4, solving proportions from word problems. So before we get started, go ahead and write at the top of this. This is entry number 4 and read your learning goal. So our learning goal is that by the end of today, what I want you to be able to do is I want you to be able to explain to someone else how you take a word problem, you break it down, you figure out what you're looking for, and you set up a proportion to solve a real world problem. Okay, so let's take a minute to review from our last mini lesson. Our last mini lesson talked about solving proportions, and we talked about several ways you could look and figure out how to solve a proportion. So some of those were, one of them we talked about, the one we've used a lot is cross products. And we said that two ratios that are proportional have their cross products are equal. So the cross products must be equal for them to be proportional. Okay, another thing we talked about was you could just simplify. And we talked about using scale factor and unit rate. Okay, so we talked about several different ways that you could solve proportions. One of those we really emphasized was the cross products property, and we're gonna look at that today. Okay, so I just want to quickly take a trip down memory lane just to kind of bring us back together and remind us how to solve a proportion before we dive into one of these word problems. So I want to just have you consider the following proportion: 2/3 equals 6 over x. And we've got to figure out what value of x would make these two ratios proportionate to each other. So one thing we learned in our last mini lesson was that in order for two ratios to be proportional, their cross products had to be equal. So what we can do is we can look at their cross products. So 3 times 6 is 18, 2 times x is 2x, and we know that those must be equal. So we've got to figure out what value 2 times what value would give you 18. So many of you already know, but you could work backwards. If you don't know 2 times what, you can just simply divide by 2. So 18 divided by 2 is 9. So 9 would be that value that would make those two ratios proportional. Okay, so we're just cross multiplying and then dividing. Okay, so when you tackle these problems today, you're doing the same thing. The only difference is we need to set up the proportion first. Okay, so I'm going to kind of take you through some steps. And while we work through these steps, we're going to be looking at number 1 as we work through these. Okay, the very first step that I want you to do is I want you to decide what are the two things being compared. Are we talking about cups of flour per batch of cookies? Are we looking at miles to hours? Are we looking at words per minute? What are the two things you're comparing? Okay, and then next thing is you're going to set up a proportion in order to solve that. So let's take a minute to read number 1. Number 1 says, so I'm right here, if Jacob Andrew jogged for 50 minutes and covered a distance of 2.2 miles, what is Andrew's speed in miles per hour? So what I want you to do when you are reading these problems, there are a lot of words. So in order to break them down, I want you to box in what was the actual question. There were a lot of words there, but what did it really want you to find? So the thing that I read was the question was, what is Andrew's speed in miles per hour? So I'm going to come over to the side, and I'm going to make a little note. And that little note is just, what do I want to show or want to know by the end of this problem? So I'm just going to put WTK for want to know. Just to remind myself, by the end of this problem, I want to know how fast is Andrew going in miles per 1 hour. I want to know how fast is he going in miles per hour. Okay? So we've Obviously, the two things we're comparing are the miles and the hours. Now we've got to set up a ratio for each situation. Okay, so right now, what do we know Andrew has done? He has covered how many miles? Right now, he's covered 2.2 miles. And how long has it taken him to cover 2.2 miles? It's taken him 50 minutes. So we're going to say if he's still going the same speed, so it's proportionate, it's got that constant of proportionality, it's got that constant rate of change, that constant speed. How many miles per hour is he going? So my ultimate thing is I want to know how many miles, so I don't know the miles, so I'm going to put an X there, and I want to know how many miles per hour. Okay, so we're going to set up a proportion for the situation. Okay. Now, step 3 is we always want to make sure our units line up. Okay, so I want you to look here, and what we should see is we should see the same units across the numerators and the same units across the denominators. So here I have miles on the top and miles over here. And then on the bottom, you see I have minutes and hours. Do they actually line up? They're both talking about time, but are they the same thing? No. So we have got to make sure that our units line up. So this is not okay the way I have it set up. So do you have an idea of how I might rewrite 1 hour so that it would have the same units as the one beside? Yeah, I could rewrite it and I could say how many minutes are an hour? 60 minutes. Okay? So step 1, we figured out what 2 things we were comparing. Step 2, we set up a proportion. Step 3, we want to make sure our units line up, so we did that. Now step 4 is we want to change all mixed numbers to, step 3, always make sure the units line up. And then step 4, we want to change all mixed numbers to improper fractions. Okay? So we want to look at this proportion and we want to say, are there any mixed numbers in there that can be changed to an improper fraction? And right now, do you see any? I don't see any improper fraction or any mixed numbers. Okay? And then the last step here, step 5, is we're going to use cross products to solve the proportion. So we're going to simply cross multiply and divide. Okay, so we know that we said that 2 ratios that are proportionate, their cross products must be equal. So we can go through and we can cross multiply. Okay, so we say 60 times 2.2, and you can go over to the side and do your work. So 60 times 2.2, and that would be 132. Okay, and then we cross multiply 50 times x, and that would be 50x. So in order for these 2 things to be proportionate, those 2 cross products have to be equal. So what I'm going to do is I have to kind of come over to the side, and I have to set them equal. So I'm going to kind of work down below because I'm running out of space. But what I'm going to say is I'm going to say 132 equals 50 times x. So we've got to figure out what value of x can I multiply by 50 to give me 132. So if I don't know what to multiply, how could I work backwards? That's right, I could divide. So I can go over to the side and I can divide. So 132, we're going to divide by 50, divide by 50. So 132 divided by 50. So how many times does 50 go into 1? It doesn't go. Does 50 go into 13? No. Does 50 go into 132? How many times? That's right, 2 times. Because 2 times 50 is 100. 132 minus 100 is 32. And we can bring down our 0. We can't just add a 0, we have to add a decimal. Okay? So bring down our 0. How many times does 50 go into 320? So think about how many times does 50 go into 300? It goes in there 6 times. So 50 times 6 is 300. So So 320 minus 300 is 20. Bring down. And how many times does 50 go into 200? Goes in there 4 times. So I'm going to come back to my problem. 2.64. What does that tell me? That tells me how many miles, which is what I was looking for here, can I go in 60 minutes. So Andrew is going 2.64 miles per hour. Now, always want to come back up here and say, did I answer my question? Did I figure out how many miles per hour he was going? And yes, I did. Okay? So, let me recap you the steps that I just went through. One is I read the question and I boxed it in and I said, what do I want to know by the end of this? So I wrote my want to know to the side. Then I read the situation. I set up 2 ratios to compare. I made sure my units were lined up with my miles and out minutes and minutes. I made sure that I didn't have any mixed numbers and changed those to improper fractions, which I didn't. And then the final thing was I used cross multiplication to solve. So I set those 2 cross products equal to each other and I divided to solve. Okay. So as you come to our station, we're going to be looking at more problems like this, where we're going to be setting up some proportions. We may have some with fractions, some with decimals. And then with any of these guys, you can simply set up a proportion, cross multiply, and divide to find the missing value. The key is making sure you've got those units lined up and you know what you're wanting to find at the end of the question. Okay, so you can take this time to go ahead and try any of the practice problems, and I will be happy to answer any questions you have when you come to my station. All right, good job, guys. Make me proud. Peace out, Rainbow Trout. Love you, mean it.